Well, here we are in Owatonna, Minnesota, and it's with my great pleasure that I introduce Jim Brandau, who is not only a good friend of mine, but he also served with me in Vietnam in 1969. And the time that he came in was right after we had taken a beating at Fire Support Base Diamond, and Jim came in as a replacement because our unit had lost so many guys that we didn't have enough of us left to actually put us out in the field, I guess, for a lack of a better term. So Jim, I just want to ask you a few questions and get a little bit of history here. Where were you born and raised?
Born and raised in Osage, Iowa.
And what's your date of birth?
10/9/1946.
Okay. And did you volunteer for the service or were you drafted?
I was drafted.
Okay. How old were you?
I would have been 21 years old.
Okay. What were you doing at the time that you got your greetings letter?
I was taking a leave from college at the request of the college.
There seems to be a little backstory there. What was that all about?
Well, they didn't think I was applying myself, so they said, why don't you take a little break?
Okay. And of course, you lost your college deferment,
Yes, I did.
just like I did. I had a similar situation, except in my case, it wasn't because they didn't think I was studious enough. It was because I thought it was more important to make money and chase girls. So, but nonetheless, we both got drafted.
Right.
And interestingly enough, we wound up in the same part of the world at a unique time in both of our lives. Tell me a little bit about this. When you got your greetings letter, what did you feel like? I mean, what was your initial reaction?
It was an expected letter, and it was one of those deals where we were raised that you needed to do service to your country and be proud of it, and so we took it in stride.
Mm-hmm. And coincidentally, that's exactly the way I felt. I mean, it was a shock. I mean, I kind of knew it was coming, but yeah, nobody takes it lightly. I mean, it's a shock. And when you got that letter, what were your folks' reaction to it?
Well, I don't think they were probably happy because my brother was in the service at the same time, and so two of their offspring were in the military during the Vietnam conflict or war. So,
What do you remember where they served?
my brother,
Yeah.
actually, he and I were at basic, we were at Fort Bliss together. We didn't go in at the same time, but he was at Fort Bliss when I came in. He also went to Fort Polk where I did AIT. He was also at Fort Benning, Georgia when I did NCO school.
Okay.
And then at that point, he went to, I think he taught, in one of my letters, he went to Fort Jackson, and then from there, he was stationed in Germany the rest of his tour.
Okay, which is why you couldn't get out under that no two brothers have to be in a war zone
Right.
at the same time. Did you encourage him to go to Vietnam?
No. I did not.
So that if he'd have went, you'd have been in Germany.
Well, if that happened, I wouldn't have met you.
That's true. That's a good point. What memories do you have of basic training?
It was hot and sandy at Fort Bliss.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, you come from the Midwest where it's all green and all it is sand and maybe cactus.
What do you remember about getting off the bus?
Well, see, here's where my memory fades. I don't.
There were platoon sergeants there, and they tried to get us to get in a formation of some kind or another, but
Oh, I'm sure they did.
half the guys in my group didn't know the difference between right and left. And of course, that just gave the DIs plenty of material to be able to jump on people about. Do you remember what kind of, what you learned or what the specific, what they were trying to impart to you in basic?
Not really.
Okay.
I know we went and qualified on firearms out. I think we went out to into New Mexico to the Sands and did that. So, but it was probably just standard
Learning to
learning.
march
Yeah,
and
yeah. So,
code of conduct,
yeah.
all that kind of stuff. And then, did you, I remember they did testing, right when we got in the service, and that was supposed to give the Army an idea where we would best be placed, right? In other words, so the
Sure.
Army would use our talents. Do you remember testing?
Well, I must have tested. I know they said I was eligible at that time for OCS school, except at that time, for some reason, if you did that, it was a 3-year commitment instead of a 2-year, and so I opted out of, or I have evidently opted out of
Yeah.
OCS school, so.
And then, so at that point, like me, you went through basic not really knowing where you were gonna go to AIT, because they never told anybody until just before graduation, right?
We had a general idea where we were going, just based on what the training units had done before, so. We had a good idea that we're going to Fort Polk.
Okay, and infantry.
Right.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about Fort Polk. It's in the United States.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Memories are not good there, you know. I don't mean from a bad standpoint. It's just that I don't recall a whole lot other than.
Were you in good physical shape?
Oh, I think so.
Yeah.
Probably better than I am now.
Oh, of course, yeah. Well, I recall that because when you came into our unit, the first thing I thought of is, this is a stud.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, no, this is definitely a stud. So, AIT, of course, then they did advanced concepts and weaponry, and we got to shoot the machine guns and the dupers, and I think we even got to shoot a Laws rocket, as I recall. Did you guys have a demonstration, an Army power demonstration?
I think we did.
And
yes.
where we were all sitting in the bleachers and they said, okay, we're gonna show you what we got, and all of a sudden an artillery shell come in over and hit a tank that was way out there, and
Yeah.
that was amazing.
Yep.
And you know, I think, for me, I think it was the first time that I thought, you know, this is a kick-ass unit. I mean, the Army probably can really hold its own.
Sure.
And so that's one of the things I remember the most. And when did you go to Vietnam?
I think I stepped foot in Vietnam on February, it's either the 17th or 18th of 1969.
Okay. And what was your impression when they opened the door? Did you go on a commercial airliner or military?
I went on commercial. It was United. We had movies. We had meals. We did stop in Hawaii to refuel. We stopped in, I don't know, I think it was Wake, refueled, and then we stopped in Okinawa and then on into Benoit.
Mm-hmm. And so they get to Benoit and they open the door, and you step foot in Vietnam. What were your thoughts at that point?
I don't know. I don't remember. I'm sure first impression is hot.
I think I broke out in a sweat.
Well,
Just the humidity.
More than likely. I do remember being on a bus that had barbed wire taking us to Long Bend, but that's about all I remember going into the replacement company.
Okay.
Until
Do you remember how long you were in replacement company?
Well, I'm not certain I was there very long. It seemed like it was probably longer, but I think I got to the unit, I'm going to say, shortly after Diamond, because I was at Coochie for the training for
How
a
did they
week.
get, how did they get you from Long Bend to Coochie?
Convoy.
Truck,
Yeah.
in the back of a deuce and a half? Yeah. And, uh, do you think you were thinking at that time that, because they told us that they got ambushed once in a while in that convoy going to Coochie, and did you have any thoughts about, well, we don't even have a weapon?
Yes.
I mean, that was one of the things
Yeah.
that, and I thought, this is nuts, you know, but thank God when we went out, we took our drive, we didn't get ambushed, but they did, they got ambushed quite a bit. And, when did you arrive at the, now you just said you went to Coochie, and then what did they do first with you at Coochie before you were even assigned to the company? Was that where you did the little booby trap school, or?
Yeah, we did a schooling, and it was about a week, and I do know that during the training period, it was TET 69, and we had enemy in the wire, and I think there was 2 red alerts. One night there wasn't anything. The second night there was people in the wire and people that had gotten into the camp with satchel charges.
Mm-hmm, yep. Welcome to Vietnam.
That's exactly right.
Kind of, huh?
Yeah, and I still don't think I had a gun.
No, you wouldn't have until, well, we'll get to that. Then you found out that you were assigned to Charlie Company.
Yep.
And so you were either walked there, got driven there or something, and you got out, and the company clerk or whatever came out and gave you did they give you a little orientation about Charlie Company or anything like that? Do you remember?
Sure they did, but I don't remember.
Do you remember who the company clerk was that talked to you?
No, I don't.
Okay. Did you get one of those lighters with the Wolfhound crest on it?
Oh, yes.
Okay. And do you know where they came from?
No.
Teach, Kelly, who was the company clerk when I walked into the unit, his dad, who owned an implement company in Indiana, had a whole, like 500 of them in a case sent over to Vietnam to his son to give to every guy that came into the unit. And so that's how we got those. But most people don't have any idea where they came from. But that's the backstory behind that. And so now you're with Charlie Company, and at this point is where they told you to go to the supply room and get issued your weapon and so forth. And you know what though, I gotta back up. I really gotta back up. After AIT, they gave a talk and said, you, Jim Brandau, are a good candidate for instant NCO school.
That's correct.
So then you went where?
Fort Benning, Georgia.
Okay, so that's where you went to Benning.
Yeah.
And what was that training like?
It was, I think it was more informational than what I'd gone through in basic and AIT.
Map reading?
Map reading, being able to call in artillery, airstrikes.
Any leadership courses?
Oh, I'm sure there were.
Yeah. So we used to call you shake and bakes
Yeah.
and 90-day wonders.
Yeah.
And what was your anticipation how you would be received in the unit when you came in as an E5? A new guy. E5 new guy.
I think, like most new guys, you didn't really know how well you'd be accepted. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, I wanted to bring that up because you came in as an NCO. You
That's
came in
correct.
as a sergeant, not a E1 or E3 or whatever. So you're in Charlie Company, you're issued your weapon and web gear and so forth and so on. And then they said, we're going to take you out to the field where the unit's at. And of course, by that time you knew, what unit were you first, where did you go first when you went out to the field?
My recollection is that I went to Tainan, and I think at that time we were staying in Tainan and staying at a Holiday Inn is what I recall. I do recall, cleaning weapons. I do recall going to an outdoor movie. In fact, it was the movie Jericho with, I think it was Dean Martin in it.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I'm laughing because we went in a 3-day stand down in Cu-Chi, and they had a huge, it must have been like a huge sheet or something for a screen, and we're all sitting there, and the movie came on Barbarella with Jane Fonda. And have you ever seen that movie?
I probably have.
Yeah, it's a real risque, let's just say. And of course, at that moment, Jane Fonda was probably the fantasy of every
Sure.
vet in Vietnam, right? And then, of course, we all know that changed when she traded Jane Fonda in for Hanoi Jane, and that kind of ruined her whole deal with veterans and so forth. So when you arrived at okay, so you're in Tay Ninh. Was the second platoon there, and that's when, I mean, I was there, but is that when you joined us?
Yes.
Okay. And did anybody tell you what the unit was all about, or what had been going on with the unit, or?
I'm sure they'd had, or somebody had, because of what happened at Diamond.
Right.
That we were replacements for people that were lost during that engagement.
Yep. Do you remember, was there other people that went in with you to Charlie Company? Was there more than just you, or did?
I'm sure there was, but to tell you the truth, I don't know who they would be.
Okay. And then, what was your first impression of us? The guys that were the old guys, let's say.
You were the old guys. You were the guys that we needed to learn from to get ourselves through 12 months.
Yeah. So your attitude wasn't, well, now I'm a sergeant, so I need to go in there and tell these guys what to do.
Oh, no, I hope not. As I recall, I got to be good friends with you and Ray Bourgeois, and I think I told you I don't know anything, and I'm just going to be behind you for a few weeks and then take it from there.
That's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
Yep. So, and you were one of the smart ones, because, we actually had, especially new lieutenants.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you served with some of them, and when they came in and they had the attitude of, I'm above you and we don't fraternize and you're going to do everything I say, that's kind of the wrong, especially in Vietnam.
Yeah.
Out in combat, that usually didn't get them very far. And so you met Ray and I remember that just like it was yesterday. And we were at Tay Ninh, and then where did we go from Tay Ninh? Do you remember? Was that when we were operating on the Cambodian border?
I don't, my time frames are not very good. I know we went out at Tay Ninh and did some sweeps and ended up walking into a U ambush where we had snipers on both sides, where we had some people injured, but it seems to me that we left the city of Tay Ninh, but we were still out in the field at Tay Ninh, as I recall. And then I think, and I've done some research through some letters that I had sent to my wife and parents that I've gone through, that I think we went to Trang Bang and were there for a period of time.
That's right.
Operated out of there.
That's right. And that was while we were being built up. In other words,
That's correct.
they were trying to get enough replacements to get us up to where we could actually go out and operate as a platoon. And so you got in your first firefight not very long after being in the platoon.
That's right.
And I know you probably don't remember exactly, but what do you think your thoughts were? I mean, it's all fine and good in training, and all of a sudden,
Well, that's what you were trained for.
yeah,
So, anyway, that's the way I think I reacted.
yeah,
was,
yeah,
This is what I was trained to do. So.
yep, yep. And of course, you were a squad leader. I think you were assigned as a squad leader, right?
That's correct.
When you first came in, and you were carrying an M16, as I recall.
Yeah.
Okay. And do you remember the first? Well, you talked about getting ambushed, and a couple of guys got hurt. And what I was going to ask you is, do you remember being out there when one of us got killed? Do you remember that, an incident where that happened?
That I do not remember. I do remember a 32-year-old that we had in the platoon that we always felt was there because he wanted to die. And I know, and I'm not certain when he got wounded, but I do recall through the letters that I've gone through that crawled out to him, and then we did pull him back and, of course, dusted him off, and I don't think we saw him after that again. So.
And who would you say were your closest buddies in Vietnam?
I would say you and Ray, because I don't know. I think Sergeant Marquez took a liking to me, and so he was, I think, trying to school me.
Oh yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
And do you remember who the platoon leader was? Did we have a lieutenant at that time? Was it Baker, Joel Baker?
I don't recall the lieutenants. I do recall that we had a National Guard at
That was him.
at one point.
Yep, that was him.
But I thought, and he might have been there, but I think he was out with us at Diamond 3.
Yep, and he joined us at Trang Bang.
Okay.
That's where he joined us. And that was an interesting story because when we found out he was a National Guard guy,
Yeah.
it was like he had no street cred with us at all. I mean, worse than, and he was a really smart guy. Because Ray and I at that time were kind of running things. And I'll never forget, he walked up to one of the bunkers that we were at and he introduced himself. And he said, first thing I want to let you guys know is I don't have a clue. He says, I know, I've gone through all the OCS training, I know how to read a map, but he says, otherwise, I don't know anything about Vietnam. And he says, do you guys think you could show me the ropes? And I'll never forget, I thought, you know what, that's the smartest thing I've ever heard an officer say since I've been in Vietnam. And so what Ray and I did is we'd go out on ambushes and walk point and take him with us. And so that he actually got to know how to go and set up, and there's nothing like doing it.
Yeah.
You can talk about it, but that was Joel Baker. So that was an interesting experience. And did you get to take an R&R?
No.
Okay.
I was supposed to go in August. That did not happen.
Okay. How many months had you been with us before you got hurt?
Well, it had been February, and I was wounded on July 16th, 1969.
Okay. And you came in February?
Yep.
Yeah. And just tell us a little bit about what you remember. As I recall, one of the other platoons, their platoon sergeant went on R&R, had to take a leave for some reason. I think it was Grissom. And then they told you were going to be running that platoon. Does that fit with your memory?
Yes.
And tell us how that was going over to that platoon and so forth.
Well, I don't think it was the easiest thing because, I'd worked with 2nd Platoon for as long as I'd been there, and so you get accustomed to the guys that you work with, so you go to a new unit that you don't know the guys, or, you probably knew who they were, but you weren't familiar with how they would react. So,
Mhm.
so it was, but it was one of those things that you did because you were told to do it.
Yep.
So
So, how long had you been with them before you got hurt?
that I don't know. I don't think it had been very long. It might have been less than a week.
Okay. And so, of course, one of the things that we were doing is we were running day rifts.
Yep.
And then at night we'd do ambush patrols.
Yep.
And as I recall, you, well, I'll let you tell the story, but you were walking during the day coming back towards the hard spot that we were at. And did you step on something or hit a tripwire? What happened exactly?
Well, as I recall it, Vladimir, who I learned later was my radio man, and I were coming back in, the platoon was coming back in off of a day rift, and as I recall, he and I moved over to the center, which was the wrong thing to do, to try and get the guys back into the wire, and I tripped a small booby trap.
Do you think it was a wire?
Oh, I know it was.
Oh, so it was a wire?
Yeah.
Okay. So you were just doping off, basically?
Well, we shouldn't have been in the middle at the beginning.
Yeah, oh no, I know, but I mean, you weren't looking down. I mean,
No.
and probably, if I remember, if you were getting ready to get back on the wire, there wouldn't be any booby traps around there anyway.
Right.
You know, so a guy wouldn't be looking
Yeah.
for that. Okay, so the booby trap goes off, and what happened then?
Well, as I recall, I spun ready to fight because we didn't know what was going to happen, and of course there was no enemy in the area at that time. So, as I recall, I think I made some gallows humor comment to whoever the medic was, which I'm not certain if it was Doc Flores or it was somebody else. And I assume they probably hit me with morphine. And
Did you even know the extent of what had happened? Did you know? Obviously, you probably figured your foot was.
no, I did not know.
You didn't even.
No. No.
I guess that would be like shock, or your foot just goes.
Yeah, and there was no blood, or very little blood, because I think the explosion cauterized everything,
Mm-hmm.
and all of the damage was done below my knees. I had no shrapnel above the knees during that explosion.
Mhm.
So
And so, did you know at that time that Vladimir had taken a little bit of that?
yes, I knew he had taken some.
And then I think Ricardo Zamora was standing just on the other side of you, because he was there that day, and he got some shrapnel off of that one. And so there was three of you basically, I guess, that, and then they send a chopper out for you?
I think in Vladimir's has done a recount, and he said there was a supply chopper that was going back into Cucci, and they diverted it in to pick up the wounded.
Which makes sense.
Yes.
That was he was the closest to you. So, do you remember the helicopter ride?
Quite frankly, no. I do remember thinking, well, I'm not coming back to this. I knew I was probably hurt enough that I wouldn't come back to the field.
And so then you got into the 14th evac? Is that in Cucci anyway? It was in the
Cucci.
evac center. And what do you remember about that experience?
I don't remember a lot there. I'm not certain how long I was there, because in Vladimir's recount of the events said that they were moving, that he saw me on a gurney, and I was, my one leg was heavily bandaged, and whoever the assistant was that was moving me had responded to Vladimir's question and said that I was leaving very soon, which I take to mean that they were moving me to Japan pretty
Okay,
quick.
okay.
So.
Did they do any initial surgeries in Coochie?
Oh, I'm sure they did.
Oh, yeah,
Yes.
so, and then, so your folks are gonna get a telegram.
Well, that's a good question. You know, I've been going through letters and things I sent my mom, dad, and I don't know if I was watching a military movie or something where, you know, people were notified, of course, when somebody had died, you know, but I have wondered how my parents were notified, and I think I was the one that notified them because I recall calling them from the hospital in Japan.
Oh, yeah. And of course, they were glad you weren't hurt any worse than you were, but probably everybody was guarded about what they told them,
Sure.
you know, because they don't, you know, especially moms, they don't want to send them over the edge. What was Japan like?
I don't remember much.
Just surgeries and,
Surgeries, and I do recall that I think there was a burn unit near where I was at, and just recalling that, I'm glad I didn't get burned,
Yeah.
because those guys were in a lot of pain.
was there damage done to your ankle or your foot?
There was damage done to both the legs, yes.
Okay. And one worse than the other?
Yes.
And what were if you recall this, what were the doctors telling you at that point? Were they saying, hey, we can probably get you patched up, or what were they?
They were saying the right one was not as severely damaged. The left leg was severely damaged, and I think the reason they were getting me back to the States as soon as possible was to try and save the leg.
Mm-hmm. They would have a place where more specialized,
Right.
better treatment and so forth and so on. So as you recall, how many, was this from the time you stepped on the booby trap until you got to the hospital in the United States, how long was that?
The exit date on my orders that I looked at was the 31st of July. So I assume that's the date that I left Japan. And so I was wounded on July 16th, so it was probably not more than 2 weeks.
Yeah,
I was
so-
back in the United States.
Okay.
Yes.
And then, of course, was there a lot of pain?
No,
Is it because they had you on painkiller?
I don't think so. I think I don't recall having a lot of pain
Okay.
on any of it. So.
And when you got to the States, then you went into a special unit, and then did you have surgeries done there?
They flew us into, I think it's Scott Air Force Base in Illinois, and from there the wounded were dispersed to basically hospitals that were close to where you lived, and so they sent me to the hospital at Fort Riley, Kansas.
Oh, yeah. Do you remember, did you take the flight home in one of those planes? I know Moose told me that there was just stretchers, they had built-in things so that guys were just on stretchers all throughout the body of the airplane?
That's basically what we were on,
Yeah,
yes.
okay. And so now I remember this because you sent me pictures of you in a hospital bed.
Oh,
And a couple of guys were standing next to the bed, and you really, all of you looked really happy. I mean, it didn't look like a guy that, had really taken a pretty good wound. Do you remember anything about your hospital stay?
oh, not a lot. I don't remember the guys' names that were in the hospital room with me.
Mm-hmm.
But it was at Fort Riley where they gave me two choices on my left leg. And one is that they could save it. It had basically, the explosion had crushed my ankle, took out a lot of muscle in that area. Of course, skin was gone. And they said, well, it'll take probably 2 years in the hospital to go through the bone fusions, bone grafts, skin grafts, muscle grafts. And they said at that time you would also walk in like a brace on your foot because the Achilles tendon was gone. And they said you have no feeling in there. I could move my toes. And they said, in their opinion, that if it ever got cut, you would never know it and get infected. Their consensus was that it would probably have to be amputated at some point anyway. So it was determined at that time to have the left leg amputated.
Was that a shock?
I'm sure it was a shock, but you also had to look at reality. And so,
Yeah. And
and I felt I was young enough at that time to adjust to an artificial limb, where if it's 20, 25 years later, then you're looking at different problems.
You're right, too. That was good thinking, because that was absolutely correct. So now you're facing amputation,
Yep.
and they take you into surgery and amputate the leg. How long did it take for that wound to get to a point where they could start working with you on a prosthetic device?
Not very long. I went through physical therapy at Fort Riley. Of course, I had to get back. It was like learning to walk all over because the right leg was damaged and hadn't been used for a while. And of course, didn't have the left leg, so went through that. But I was there July 31st, or shortly there. I was then sent to Fitzsimmons, which was in Denver, Colorado, because that's where most of the amputees would go. And I do know that I had a new leg by my birthday, which was October 9th of that year.
Okay.
So,
No, so when you got your leg amputated, and I'm assuming then they take the skin and
Yep.
cover it and sew it and so forth, did you have feeling? You know, you mentioned you didn't have any feeling in that leg. Was there feeling there?
I did go through some phantom pains for a while, not a lot, but you know, or even today, I can contract the muscles. It feels like I'm moving my toes.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
So,
And then, when you first tried your prosthetic, I would think that raw wound, I don't know, not raw, but I mean, would really be painful to put into a sleeve, or what are they called? Whatever, you know.
it was painful. It was painful because I went through a period where they had to do a lot of work to adjust it, so it was comfortable.
Okay.
So you didn't have the pain.
Oh, yeah. So they deal with that
Sure.
all the time, I'm assuming. Okay. Now, when did you get out of the Army?
Oh, it was, if I went in March 20, I think it was April 7th of 1970. I was medically retired.
Okay. And then you went home?
Yes.
And what was that like, first day back at the home front?
It was fine because I had been home during my stay at Fitzsimmons.
Oh, okay.
So it wasn't.
Like they'd give you a leave or whatever?
Yeah, yeah.
So, and did you have your buddies and stuff come by, and your friends that you'd grown up with? Did you have any relatives that had come and
No, I didn't have. They visited when I got home. Nobody came out while I was at
Okay.
Denver. My parents and my brothers and sisters did come to Fort Riley, Kansas, and visit once. So.
What was your parents' reaction to you getting wounded like that?
I don't know. I'm sure they were devastated that, but picked up and went on with life.
And so what did you do for work or a career right after going home? What direction did you take in your life?
Well, after I got home, I went back to school. I went to school at Wartburg College, finished my degree there.
And they accepted you?
They did. This time, they thought I might be a little more serious. So,
And plus, they liked the GI Bill.
yeah, that may be. And then I took a year of undergraduate at a university in northern Iowa, which is just south of where I live now. And then I got into
What was your course of study? What were you going for?
when I was first there, I was I ended up with a math major, but I geared once I got back to school after the service. I finished the math major portion of it, but then concentrated more on business studies.
Okay.
So.
And so, do you remember the first real job? I say real job, I mean like a full-time position. What did you end up doing?
I went to work for Transamerica Life and sold life insurance
Okay.
for a while.
And then did you just keep in the financial services business from that point on?
No.
What did you do after that?
I forget how long I was there, but then I got into with some guys, and we had a sporting goods store that we owned for a while. And during that time, I became a magistrate for the state of Iowa.
Most people probably have no idea what a magistrate is. Could you explain a little bit about that?
Magistrate is a lower court judge that dealt with simple misdemeanors and small claims.
Is that sort of like justice court?
Yes.
Oh.
Well, no.
I don't even know what.
Yeah, are you talking about the TV shows?
No, I mean like in Montana, the lowest court is the justice court.
Well,
And they deal with
right.
the smaller.
That would probably be.
Yeah, okay, but they called it a magistrate
Yeah.
in your state.
Yeah.
So how long did you do that?
36 years.
Wow. I didn't realize you did that for that long. So what'd you do after that?
Well, during that period, I had a good friend that was in the financial industry, and he always kept telling me to come back in and work with investments, which I did I did that while I worked as a magistrate, because it was a part-time job, and then I worked the financial industry, and after I retired from the magistrate's job, I worked for probably total about 25 years in the financial industry.
You must have really enjoyed that part of it. It's different than selling life insurance.
Oh, yes, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
great. Now, I didn't ask this before, but were you married when you went to Vietnam?
No.
Okay. So, when you said you sent letters home to your wife, that was your fiance or girlfriend or?
Girlfriend.
Okay. And so that stuck. I mean, that relationship apparently was strong enough to.
Yeah, there were some times when it probably wasn't the strongest, but
Well,
before we got married.
yeah,
Yeah,
of course,
yeah.
of course. So,
My wife's probably going to look at this, so.
sometime or another. So, tell us about after you got married, when did your family start growing?
Well, our first daughter was born February 2nd of 71, and our second daughter was born October 29th of 1972. So,
What are their names?
the oldest is Lori, and the youngest is Leah.
Okay. So you had the two girls.
Yep.
And what did they do when did they go to college and when they got old enough and so forth? Did you encourage them to
Oh, yes.
do that, go for a degree and so forth?
The oldest went to school at Wartburg to begin with, or got her 4-year degree there, and then went to the University of Iowa and became an attorney.
Oh, excellent.
And the youngest had always wanted to be a physical therapist, she went to St. Louis University, and that's what she is now, as
Oh,
a
wow,
physical therapist.
That's great. So you're real proud of those girls.
Oh, I am.
So Jim, when you came home, did you keep in touch with any of your buddies or any of the guys that were in the platoon?
No.
Did you ever think about us or think, I'd sure like to see them again or contact them or?
Oh, I'm sure I did, but I put it in the back of my compartment in one of my brain cells, or what little I had, and went on with life.
Did you talk to anybody about your experiences in Vietnam?
No.
So you were like most of us, you just didn't speak
That's
about
correct.
it. And what did you think of the first reunion?
Oh, well, I really did enjoy it, as it turned out, because first of all, to see some of the guys, even though I didn't remember them, but also realizing that there were people just like me that may remember some of the events but don't remember names and remember faces.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And do you remember Rick Alley at that?
Oh, yes.
At that reunion?
Yep.
And he sat there the whole reunion and never said anything.
Yep.
And then on the last day, he got the microphone. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do.
And wow, when what he said to me made it worth everything.
Sure.
I mean, that was in the back of my mind. That was the whole purpose, And then, remember, he said he felt guilty because he said I left Vietnam and I left all you guys behind, and he says I never once ever tried to contact. And he took it really hard. It was like, of course, he kept in touch with NASO because they lived
Sure.
right there in New York and so forth. So the reunions have turned out to be a very good thing. We have, as you know, we have them every other year. And tell me what you thought of the fishing trips.
Loved them.
So that was when the off year, thanks to Moose,
Yep.
he set that up. What do you remember about the first fishing trip in particular?
I remember our accommodations.
We had paid for first class
That's right.
rooms, right?
Right. And Moose had evidently miscommunicated the dates, and so I don't think all of the units were full, but at the lodge. But as it turns out, Steve Klaus, Moose, you and I stayed in a little
Camper trailer.
that was really not suited for more than two of us to begin with. And so it was a very memorable first fishing trip.
Do you remember, Klaus, how he had to get up in that little, there was no more than about 14 inches.
Yep.
And he'd get back and run and
That's
jump
correct.
jump up there and throw himself sideways. Yeah, and I remember all of us, because being veterans in our age, all of us have to get up in the middle of the night.
Well, some of us do.
Yeah, you didn't have to?
I didn't.
Oh, good for you. And you were sleeping down from me. You and Moose were on the air mattress.
That's correct.
And then Klaus was up above, and I was down here next to the bathroom.
Right.
And I remember waking up, and I'd look over, and your stump was up on the, you had it elevated up
That's
on
correct.
the, yeah. And I just thought, well, there you have it. There's Jim. And when Moose would get, he got up a lot.
Yes, he did.
When he'd get up, you'd go down.
That's correct.
And when he'd come back, boom,
Yeah.
he'd launch you up off of that thing. And as I recall, the last 2 days, you and I got a room.
That's correct.
And I told,
Stumpy was happy.
yeah, and I told Minnie Moose, I said, that was the two best days getting to sleep on a bed. That was great. And so let's see again, what is your definition of a hero when you think about that?
Well, like I said before, it's a hard question. To me, it's somebody who is put into a situation that does something that a normal person wouldn't do, but has been trained and goes up above and beyond what is expected of them. I do think that most people who you say are heroes do not think of themselves as heroes. They did what they were trained to do.
Did you think anybody in Vietnam that you served with was a hero?
I think everybody that I served with was a hero. Walked with a lot of heroes.
What's that? Yeah, yeah. And what is your definition, or what do you think about the American flag? What does it mean to you?
That means everything. I'm proud of the country. I'm proud of the flag.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we need to get back to the point where the younger generation needs to do some type of service for the country so they appreciate what they have.
What was your reaction when the NFL players started kneeling and protesting?
Well, they certainly have the right. I also have the right not to watch the games, which I don't watch that much anymore anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing is, my thought is, if you think it's so bad here, why don't you move? I don't see people moving out of the country. I just see people coming into the country.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and I think part of it is if the media would not have played it up, it would not become a non-event.
I think you're right.
So,
Yep, I think you're right. Now, one of the things that
you
has
really
helped,
want to get me wound up, don't you?
yeah, one of the things that has helped you and I is I know I wrote my parents' letters the whole time I was in Vietnam. And one of the things I remember specifically is every time I would write my mother, I would basically say everything's fine, great day, weather, rain. I mean, really just non-eventful stuff. Maybe I'd mention where we were at. And then my dad, I would write more serious. I would share more with him. And I never gave it a thought until it was probably 2 or 3 years after I'd gotten home. My mom said, "Do you want all the letters that you wrote me?" And she had them all in chronological order, boxed up, and I thought, sure. I didn't think why, but I said, sure. In other words, is she going to throw them away? I never even looked at one of them. Just put them in my Vietnam stuff and stored it. And then when my dad died, I didn't know that his second wife had, my dad saved every letter and had them boxed up. And she called me on the phone and said, "Would you like the letters that you wrote your dad while you were in Vietnam?" And I thought, yeah, I'd like, there was more information there, and I thought I'd get more of a timeline type of thing. So she gave me all those, and I put it in the box and put it up in the attic. And that really, when I started in 2003, what gave me kind of the impetus to do this is I was reading some of these letters to my dad. I mentioned guys' names. And you were one of them, of course, and I think you even wrote my dad a letter. I think I have that letter, if I'm not mistaken. And I think he wrote you back or something. And I thought, man, I got to find these guys. Ed Rambo was there when I walked into the unit, and he was instrumental in teaching me. Joe Wascom was the first guy that I met when I walked in, and so I just thought, man, I got a real passion for trying to find the guys. And even in the beginning, I didn't know what was going to come of it.
Sure.
But I just wanted to find them. And so you had kind of a similar experience in that you got some letters that your mom, that you had written your mom, and you gave me this outline of all those letters. And I think your dad even sent you some cuttings from the newspaper and so forth like that. And if it's okay with you, I'm going to put this on your page on the website, and because this is history right here, and it very well done, by the way. This is intriguing to me. So I think it's interesting that we kind of had the same experiences, even after we got home, you know? And so that, you know, I've told people this, our time in Vietnam is a puzzle. And it's, the puzzle pieces is every man that was there. And as we do this, and as we get oral histories of each guy, that's another puzzle part. And another puzzle part. And hopefully I live long enough that I'll be able to get all the puzzle pieces. And what a phenomenal story, you know, of our service in Vietnam and the unit and so forth. So that's, you know, that's my goal, is to get that done. And in finishing up, I'd like you to look in the camera, and I'd like to have you give advice to the generations coming up that are going to watch this. Your grandkids are going to watch it. Your great-grandkids are going to watch it. And I told you we're going to get this funded for 100 years. This site's going to be up for 100 years, and also in the National Archives. But most importantly, it's going to be in video form where, you know, people can watch it. I just want you to give them advice, or what would you like to say to them when they're watching it 30 years from now?
Boy, these are some deep questions, John. You know, the advice I would give is be proud of your country, understand what the country has done over the years, and just be proud of yourself. I don't know what else.
Work ethic?
Yeah, you know, well, we came up in a work ethic, you know, and I think that's why we survived 30 years without talking to anybody, is that we were brought up, well, okay, that part's done. Let's go finish school, get a job, have a family, and so you just went on.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like you waited around for something to happen.
Right, or somebody to give you something.
That's right.
So, last question. What has Mary Ellen meant in your life?
Oh,
Now look up into the camera, so, because she's going to watch this one of these days.
well, she's the love of my life, number one. Number two, she was a registered nurse, and so with the medical issues that I've had over the years, she's been there to guide me and support me through those.
Mm-hmm.
You know, she's a wonderful mother, wonderful grandmother. Love her to death.
Yes.
Cut.
I love, you know what? I love her to death too. You know, your wife is an amazing woman, absolutely amazing. So, well, Jim, all I can say is thank you, buddy. Thank you for everything you did in Vietnam with me. And one thing I didn't mention is Jim was the guy that pinned my sergeant stripes on me, because Sergeant Marquez was pissed off at me for some reason or other. But I'll never forget that either, when you came down and said, hey, you know, we're not going to make you wait any longer. But Jim, thank you so much for what you've done in your life, and how you've befriended me and kept me as a friend all these years.
Well, no, I thank you for doing this. I've watched some of the interviews that have been done, and it's just invaluable. They can take mine off, but you know, just hearing the stories of each of of our fellow veterans is amazing.